Good evening. Calling the Rules Review Committee to order on July 1st, 2025 at 6:30 here in the City Council chambers of the City of Wausau. Quorum is present. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from previous meetings of June 3rd, 2025. A motion, they were in your packet. A motion to approve would be in order. There is a motion by Alderperson Killian and Mr. Martin and Alderperson Martin. Any comments or questions with regard to the motion to approve the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of said motion, say aye. Opposed? Motion is agreed to, and the minutes of June 3rd, 2025 are approved. Moving then on to the reconsideration of revised Rule 5. Order of Business and the Common Council, which is in your packet. So we'll decided to take each rule separately. Rule 5 is in your packet. There was a question with regard to the issue of the mayor's comments and suggestion issue. Upon further consideration and with regard to what the county board does with regard to, they have their announcements at the end of all the county board persons at the end of the meeting, and I think what my experiences with that was that it worked very well. But a person questioned the removal of the mayor's comments and suggestion part from moving that from the first part of the agenda part of Rule 5. So I thought I would bring that discussion back again this evening and further comments from the committee. Yes, Alderperson Killian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It feels to me as though having the mayor make comments and recommendations at the onset of the meeting like he's already done, it seemed like the issues were that he hadn't agendized what he was going to talk about. So I'm not sure why that should be changed as far as its placement in the order of business. But the having announcements at the end of the meeting for alderpersons sounds like a positive idea to me, but I don't know that it's necessary to change the comments and recommendations from the mayors at the onset.
It's just that I don't want, that's into some type of general discussion because it's really not a discussionable item because that really does, engaging in discussion would not be appropriate because I think that would certainly be, would have to be because it's not agendized, it's not part of the business of the city council at that time. So, comments clearly identified, clearly agendized, but I look to the committee for comments.
Couldn't it be made known that it's not for a lengthy discussion, that it's a place for comments and recommendations, and there should be a brief description of what he's going to be discussing or commenting on?
Any comments or questions? Yes, Alderperson Tierney.
I do like that idea. I think that, again, having it where it is, I don't think has really been the problem. I think the problem is that it hasn't been detailed. So I think that, again, having it on the agenda, what he is going to comment about might work for some people better, since it's going to be clearer what he's going to do and would satisfy the open meetings portion of this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Becky.
My issue with all of this is that it depends upon what he's planning on doing or whatever any mayor is planning on doing. What I don't want is some pre-comments on anything on the agenda that the city council will be speaking to. That's not his place to start that out. That's, if it's proclamations like they used to have, I guess that's where I want clarification, because he, at one point during our first meeting, said, well, I want to respond to public comment. I think we have to very narrowly define what a comment is. This isn't a give and take for responding to public comment that just got completed, or I want to talk about items 1 and 7 and give you my feeling on it. I don't think that's appropriate. That's my opinion. I think the council is the one that is going to deliberate. If he has some type of, somebody asks him a question or something at that time, but I don't think it's good practice for him to give his opinion on the item before it is called up.
Because the mayor would have opportunities on speaking to specific agenda items with regard to that. Specific agenda items, that's why we have the agenda. So I think this would have to become a very narrow, yes, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Alder McElhaney on that. I think that if including the, including on item number 6, communications and recommendations from the mayor, could open, depending on what that communication is, it may create an instance where the council feels it needs rebuttal, and that would definitely not be the time or the place for it. So if there was statements that pertain to a particular agenda item, they should be, the mayor should use that opportunity to make that comment when that agenda item is brought forward. I do have one question, though, about the addition of point 11, which is announcements from mayor and alderpersons. At one time, we had an issue, previous administration, we had an issue with that, with alders making announcements from their seat, and we changed the rules so that they were unable to do that. So maybe I'm just going to kick this over to the parliamentarian. Would adding this item to the agenda give them the opportunity to make announcements from their seat, or would they have to exit and go to the rostrum to make those announcements?
Thank you, Alder Martins. I think what you're thinking of is public comment. I mean, for purposes of council meetings and public comment, alderpersons are not citizens. And so that's what I think became objectionable, were council members sitting at their seats and making public comment and or getting up and going to the podium and making public comment. These are announcements. So committee announcements, or I'm having a neighborhood meeting, or I want to invite you to a public information session, or, we've got an officer coming to speak at our neighborhood meeting, something like that. I see that as falling under this proposed number 11, announcements from mayor and alderpersons. And as the council, you can make up whatever rules you want, and you can put it in any order that you want. So if that's what you want that to be, are truly announcements, and allow you all to do that, that's, to me, completely different than making public comment on any issue that's on the agenda or otherwise.
So because with our agendas, the only perceived opportunity was to make those announcements during public comment, we deemed it inappropriate and did not allow it. But adding announcements from the mayor and alderpersons would allow that opportunity for alders and the mayor to make announcements.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Does that? I think that's clear, don't you?
Just a further note, on the county side, that they're limited to 1 minute. It was 30 seconds, but they opened up the rules last time to include because sometimes people do run off. So the rules include a 1 minute limit on your announcements.
I like that, thank you.
Yes, Alderperson Tierney.
I do like that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would we be able to, when it says announcements from mayor and alderpersons, shouldn't it be something like not pertaining to the agenda or not pertaining to agenda items? Because if you want to announce a neighborhood meeting or a nonprofit, that thing that's going on, or something in the city that is happening in your district that you would like people to come to or be interested in. But I don't feel that it should be on any item that's on the agenda, because again, I think that opens up a can of worms for the meeting. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Further, like a further comment or a further rebuttal or affirmation of something on the agenda.
Right.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, if we left comments and recommendations where it was on the agenda, could we denote there very specifically that it was not to be commented on agenda items, just like Alder Tierney just said, and just be very specific about what can and can't be done at that place on the agenda?
well, we can add that, but it just, I think we have to be careful adding verbiage, a lot of verbiage, but I think those words can be attached to that agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
The rest of the committee, any further comments or questions with regard to Rule 5? So we'll reinstate that with with qualifying words with regard to not on the agenda and or
Could we say
a specific item, it has to be specifically identified, the comments and suggestions from the mayor.
So do you want, currently, in the current rules, it's communications and recommendations from the mayor. Do you want that language back up there with the additional language of not pertaining to the agenda?
Well, this is, we need your feedback. This goes to the committee of the whole, so how do we feel? Mr. Martin?
Yeah, I believe, when if we're adding communications and recommendations from the mayor, I think we need to make a point that it has to be agendized. But then the second half too is we also want the communications and the recommendations be of items not pertaining to agenda items. So to keep the order of business tight, would there be another spot in which that could be, in our rules, in which that could be made? The more, a further definition of what, what these items are and what the intention is of communications and recommendations are. Because I think right now, we're stuck with kind of a wide reading of what a communication is, and that's what's that's what we're getting caught up in. So, is to narrow it down, would those be in the? Do we add that in the order of business, or can that be added in some other spot within our rules?
I think right now you need to decide or come to some consensus, and you could do both. You could put in comments and suggestions from the mayor back in the order of business where it was, and then leave announcements toward the end of the order of business, or you could reverse that order. I mean, you have to decide the order and the heading, the item of business, whether you want comments and whatever it read, comments and communications and recommendations from the mayor, And then we have announcements, which I think are completely different. And you can qualify either one of them to be for items not appearing on the agenda. But you need to decide which headings of either of those two or both that you want, and in what order you want them to appear in the order of business. Is that what your question, Caitlin? Originally? Yeah.
I put the announcements from mayor and alderpersons at the end because that's where it really belongs, at the conclusion of the business of the city council. I know that some other cities put reports from the mayor where we had it previously, number 5 or 6 up further on the agenda. But we would certainly have to qualify that. Alderperson Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I do think too is when you're talking about comments from alders, I really like that 1 minute rule, and I think somehow that should be added so that somebody
We'll add that.
doesn't
Right.
go on.
Alderperson Killian.
Mr. Chair, when you say announcements, and maybe our parliamentarian can answer that, isn't that different than the comments and recommendations, an announcement? So those seem like they're two separate categories to me.
Yeah, I think they're different.
Yes. So if
An announcement's not really an opinion or a comment or an editorial, or it's just stating a fact or an invitation or something like that. They are different.
So it feels to me as though comments and recommendations is appropriate as long as it's defined strictly about not being on an agenda item and so forth as has been discussed. Just
Any further comment? Yes.
I do like the idea as well as the announcements being at the end of the meeting. I think that's appropriate because again, it may be about the new softball team here that that it's going well or what have you, or the 4th of July fireworks is going to be at the airport or what have you. I mean, to me, that's more of an announcement and not detailed. Thank you.
So we're looking at Rule 5 with the corrections as well as adding communications recommendations from the mayor back in with a qualifier that the subject has to be clearly identified.
And for items not
And-
appearing on the agenda,
And
right?
not right.
And then at the end, we'll put the announcements 1 minute in length.
Right.
Okay.
So we're clear. Do we still want announcements from mayor and alderpersons, or just alderpersons at the end of the meeting?
I think it would be appropriate for mayor and
Okay.
alders.
Do we need a motion or consensus brings it? Because I think after Rule 6, specifically after the discussion with Rule 6, and maybe even further on to the agenda items, I think we'd be ready to call for a committee of the whole to get their feedback and then eventually to the city council. I would like to try to accomplish this as expeditiously as possible. So with that consensus, then we'll move forward. The next item on the reconsideration of the revised Rule 6, introduction of business, which you have also in your packet, and the presentations, proclamations, in case some of the revisions in front of you.
If I may jump
Of
in
course.
here. So for this Rule 6, we've been struggling with it, with how, you guys want to expect like a hard stop of when things would be added to the packet. We're not talking with staff about kind of some staff restrictions that can make that difficult. So I polled staff. I apologize. My memo was not included in the packet to explain what the heck that survey data was, so my apologies. But so I polled staff members last week to get their feedback on, their current ability to be able to put information in both a standing committee packet as well as a council packet. And there were a couple just, let me zoom in on this a little. A couple qualitative questions about, or quantitative questions about their current ability and how soon they get things to our office in order to be able to include them for a meeting. And then there were a couple open-ended questions about, what are, if they do get things to us with less than a week before a meeting, why? As well as the other question was providing feedback to both this committee as well as the committee of the whole on like possible strategies that we could implement to make this both easier for you all who are trying to consume all this information, as well as for staff to actually get that to you. And some observations that I had were that staff are requesting training, which we are currently trying to implement internally. Ann is leading the city attorney is leading a resolution training next month to help train staff on how to properly write a resolution, so that way it's a high quality resolution that when we're creating the record for direction of the city, you guys understand it and we can easily implement it. And then the second thing identified is that there are time restraints between the standing committee meeting and the council meeting. And so the way that the current standing committees are scheduled creates a quick turnaround and sometimes impossible timing to submit materials timely for that next council meeting. And then the third is that working with external parties is a regular roadblock for staff. So outside parties have different deadlines that don't always line up with our city meetings, which can delay projects or lead to submitting materials late and reducing the amount of time you guys have to actually review the information. So my recommendation was I just would like you to discuss these questions. Are there tools or strategies that could be implemented to both make it easier for staff to be able to provide information and ensure council members have enough time to review the information to make an informed decision? Also, should the consequence for submitting packet items less than 7 days before a meeting be changed or removed? Because we are regularly suspending, or you all are regularly voting to suspend the rule that, either it wasn't filed with enough time in advance or it's not coming through a standing committee. And then lastly, should there be a policy or procedure for submitting items rather than it being in your council rules as an ordinance? I think you had said maybe the city of Madison has a different internal policy, but those are just my observations from it, because if I jump back to the current Rule 6B filing, let me jump back up here. What we changed is each proposed ordinance, resolution, presentation, proclamation, memorial, and communication shall be filed in the office of the clerk no less than 7 days prior to that scheduled council meeting at which the measure is to be introduced. Council and standing committee packets must be prepared and available for distribution no less than 6 days prior to that scheduled council or committee meeting, and the council packet must also contain all committee results for each measure to be considered. In no case, this is what we changed from last meeting. In no case will packet materials be accepted after close of business the preceding week. If for good cause this pre-filing is impossible or impractical, the presiding officer of the council or chairperson of the committee may waive this requirement. So it's either we suspend the rule or the chair currently waives it. So is it an effective consequence, you could say, for not filing things timely?
Comments, Alderperson?
I feel, thank you, Mr. Chair, I feel that one of the things that we should look at a little bit more closely is public comment, because oftentimes they don't come in here to make comment at the council meeting. We'll get an email. And if they are making a comment on something that's on the agenda, or, their feelings on an agenda item, so that agenda comes out, they're reading the agenda, and they go, I want to comment on that. I worry that it won't be on the specific agenda that they're addressing it towards. Thank you.
Alderperson McElhenney?
This is a bugaboo for me because I absolutely detest getting things 2 hours before a meeting, and it's happening more and more and more. And I get, please, what is it, redo your iPad. A lot of us work. We have other responsibilities, and yet we're supposed to go on a dime all the time. HR, I have been HR chair for a long time, and I will tell you, HR packets are out a week before, period, and stop. And it started with Tony Vanderboom, and it went through James, and Jennifer really stresses actually about it. Please look this, because it's 7 days before, but it works. And I do at times allow for something at, as a last minute add-on, but not all the time. And people have, other department heads that have to go to HR have learned that she's not going to let it on. And so things are there on time. And I think that's kind of a thing we have to do. Are there ever going to be a case that would be an outlier? Absolutely. But almost 90% of our cases now are outliers. It's like, I have something, we need a special meeting. I have something, we need a joint meeting because we have to rush it through. I have gotten a lot of feedback from residents that they're starting to side-eye why everything seems rushed. And, where's the packet? I get calls, where's the packet? Where's the packet? I want to see what this is about. The agenda's done first. So I think it's something we really should strive for. I get that it's hard, but I think that if some people, sorry to say, has a consequence that their item didn't get on, they'd be more than clear next time that, I got to work at this. Because I don't think there's any, and I don't want to use the word consequence, but there's no even carrot for getting it there on time, and that's where, and I've gotten feedback from staff that they hate getting called up and we're asking questions. That's because we're on the fly. I think 90% of the time we're on the fly, and so there are some awkward questions because you don't have time to ask those questions beforehand like we did previously. I think things have gotten worse over my 10 years of being on, where things are getting more scattered, and I don't know the reason for that, but if we could really try to push this, because I know the other week we had something that came on the day of, some kind of new information or something that was pushed the day of. So I don't know if we're getting really great decision-making because we don't have time to get that. So it's not to be after staff, but it's because it's very difficult to absorb 300 pages in a day.
So the wording, in no case will packet materials be accepted after close of business day the preceding week. Are you comfortable with those wording, Alderperson Tierney?
Thank you. I agree with Alder McElhaney. I can assure you, if it comes out the day of the meeting, I'm not going to see it until I walk into this meeting. And the reason being is I do have a full-time job. I don't have my iPad open and looking at things because I would lose that full-time job. So I am on the fly when that happens. I don't have time to digest it, to think of questions. I would be one who's asking awkward questions. But I do think, as you said, there are those rare occasions where something does have to happen. If it's a money-saving situation, for example, the fire truck, it had to be by such and such a date to save $70,000. Those types of things, I understand, but again, those shouldn't be a weekly occurrence. Thank you.
Alderperson Killian.
Mr. Chair, I agree with everything Alder McElhaney said and Alder Tierney. I think unless we have some guidelines that people know have to be followed, if we say we're always flexible, but if you look how often we suspend the rules at every meeting, I mean, and something is pending from the meeting right ahead of it, I mean, it makes it impossible for the council people to make an informed decision. So I agree. I think we should leave it as it's written.
Another, if I may.
Yes.
Another choice you could do is you could strike the last sentence of B. So if for good cause this pre-filing is impossible or practical, the presiding officer of the council or chairperson of the committee may waive this requirement, and then that rule would just be suspended, right? If you needed to, is that how you would?
Well, I was just going to comment on that too, because we don't allow the chair to waive it. We put it on the agenda so the whole body votes on whether to suspend their own rules, which I think is the appropriate action to take, but that's not really in compliance with that last sentence in B. So I would
For
suggest.
council, we do that. I'm thinking like public health and safety, we regularly get that packet out within the 7 days. And there's no formal action taken at that standing committee meeting.
At the committee level,
Right.
but because we added standing committees to the council rules, then it got added in there. But so are you suggesting we either cross it out and continue to follow our practice, or say if for good cause the pre-filing is impossible or impractical, the body or the council or committee chairperson may waive this requirement to correct it to be in line with our
Because
practice?
the presiding officer of the council would not be able to, but the chair of a standing committee
Right.
would, I would
Right.
think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is the council,
So striking the word of the council or.
or
and so
taking
that
out the presiding officer
or chair
of the, I would say the,
Presiding.
of, yep.
presiding officer of the committee may waive this requirement.
You would take out the presiding officer of and say the council or chairperson of the committee may waive this requirement.
Okay. So we're just striking presiding officer of the. Yes?
Yeah.
Alderperson
I
Martin.
think, when we think about suspension of the rules, I think one of the biggest users of suspending the rules is probably the Finance Committee, considering that they meet just prior to the Common Council meeting, and often there are, not want to say often, but occasionally there are finance agenda items that need to go to council that evening. So there should be, just because of the fiscal nature of those items. So I think we even though we want that 7-day gap, we still need the ability to suspend the rules at the council meeting in order to get, if there was a finance item that was passed the hour prior to the meeting, get it on, so that it's available to be acted upon at the council meeting.
Alderperson McElhaney?
We have to remember we have 2 finance meetings a month. that gives finance time, plenty of time. There's double the meeting time that they should be able to. There might be some outliers, but I think they too should. I don't know. I can't see how finance doesn't know something's coming up and they need something done in an hour. I think that with 2 meetings a month, they should strive also to have that lag between that meeting and immediately to council, because with 2 meetings a month, that's not lagging only 2 weeks.
In reading through some of the comments, and I don't mean to be opening up another, but I think that we may be wanting to look at how we schedule committee meetings in relationship to city council meetings. I don't know. I think that's asking a lot when we double up. But I'm not wanting to go there this evening, but I think that at some point in time, I think we should, and I think that was one of the comments from the response, that it just, sometimes the connection between committees and the city council don't match. And I think we have to maybe strive for that at another time. But that's just my comment. I got that from the
comments?
the response. Alderperson McElhaney.
And there is a chance, because we have two council meetings, maybe we should do all our committee meetings the first week of the month. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know what I mean? We have those, and that would give the rest of the month at least to get into one of the 2 council meetings. I don't know, because public health and safety is what, the 3rd Monday? HR's 2nd Monday. I don't know when SISM is. I know it's on a
I think it's the second Thursday.
second
Thursday.
Thursday. Finance is 2.
Parks and Rec is the first Monday.
Monday. So really, public health and safety is the lag, it seems like. Economic development, but they're early, right? They're in the first part of the month.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just a thought, but if that's what's lagging, I don't know what all goes through public health and safety, but if that's what's lagging, maybe we move that up to another Monday.
Or to within the first or the second weeks
Right.
of the
Right,
month.
instead of the 3rd.
Instead of
Because
the
that's
3rd.
always then, the 4th, it's always just less than a week
Right.
for council, because I want people to get enough, but maybe that would also, I'm not going to be here, but that would also help future council people to absorb those meetings before the council. That would give people chance to watch the YouTube meetings and things like that and absorb that material before a council vote. That would also give them some time.
I didn't mean to open up, it's not on the agenda, but just a further comment.
Well, public health and safety, remember, is 8 days before the 4th Tuesday of the month, so that it does have time to get to the second council meeting. And your current rule says there only needs to be 3 days between a committee recommendation and council, which maybe that's the rule you want to talk about and change in the future. Maybe 3 days isn't enough time. But finance is the one that's creating an issue when it's immediately before.
I think that
council.
discussion is for another time later. So with regard to the adjustments to Rule 6, introduction of business, the highlighted areas, in addition to striking presiding officer towards the end of paragraph B. Are we fine with Rule 6?
Yeah, I'm fine with striking that.
Alderperson Killian.
I just wanted to say, it says under filing, it says each proposed ordinance, resolution, presentation, proclamation, memorial, and communication. And then it goes on to say everything shall be in writing. Would it be better just to say that all of those things on the agenda shall contain a brief statement of their content? Does it have to? Because when it says everything shall be in writing, it sounds like the whole thing shall be in writing. Couldn't we just say it should contain a brief statement of their content? I just thought it was kind of wordy.
Terry?
Doesn't that sound like it means everything, the whole thing shall be in writing? Couldn't we just say it would contain a brief statement of their content? Just a thought.
Well, I think it's talking about the full resolution or the full ordinance has to be in writing, the whole presentation, the whole item, not just a brief description of it. That's the way I've always interpreted it, but
Well, Person Killian, did that answer your concern? Thank you.
they're in writing, but we don't contain a brief statement of their content. I mean, we file, maybe that's what we strike. I mean, we propose the whole ordinance or the whole resolution. That's what gets filed with the clerk and put in the packet, but unless there's an accompanying staff memo, there's not always a brief statement of the content of each ordinance and resolution that's on the agenda, right? I would be okay with striking contain a brief statement of their content because we do everything else. Indicate the name of the presenting committee, deliver it to the clerk. It's got the vote and
So we're striking,
contain a brief statement of their content. Because if they're in writing, we've got the content, right? We don't need the full content and then a brief summary of the content.
so we're striking contains a brief statement of their content. Are we fine then with Rule 6 as amended this evening? I don't think we'll, like Rule 5, I don't think we'll need a motion. We'll just pass it on to the Committee of the Whole through consensus then. Got that?
Yeah.
Okay. So then moving on to, and these are mostly discussion items, again, discussion and possible action on creating a statement to be stated during the meetings. From our minutes, you know, we really never came up, I think I think we still, not quite sure where we are with that statement with regard to a statement to be read. Alderperson Killian?
I think that everything looks fine, except I question their inability, and I mentioned this last time, to specify personnel by name. I know that's a strong question of First Amendment rights, correct? And I know I've recently read, and I have it here, that someone was discharged from a committee meeting because they addressed someone by their name, and they sued the city, and the judge has just ruled that they should proceed with that because it's their First Amendment right to do that. So what I'm wondering is if we can say that. I mean, why would we adopt something that we could get sued for? It feels like that's such a strong legal question right now that I'm not sure how we should address that or what we should do.
I think at one time there was just identifying staff. I think just adding the word instead of personnel staff, but I thought,
Is that stifling First Amendment rights? And I would ask our parliamentarian, because I know there are many cases out there, and maybe we should be made aware of some of those cases so we can make an appropriate decision about that.
Starting with the one you just read about, I think. Yes.
Pardon?
No, starting with the case you just mentioned. I understand why that's probably in there. I'd be inclined to strike that and maybe say, again, we just be respectful about identifying or talking about alders or staff or whoever it is. Could refer to them by position or title, but I don't know that you can say they can't say someone's name, but they still should be respectful in their remarks or be reminded to be respectful.
I would say
Alderperson Kearney?
respectful. Yeah, respectful, and I don't think there should be any threatening comments, because some of the staff over the past year have gotten threatened, and we've seen people get very, very caught up in their opinions on some issues that are out there. And respectful, and I just think anybody who does any type of threatening behavior towards a particular person should just be removed. I just think that would be completely unacceptable.
And I think we've been very specific, saying that it's up to the chairperson of that committee to maintain decorum. So if something inappropriate happens, it needs to be addressed. But I worry about the legality of us saying that we can't address someone by their name.
Right, right. I would discourage that as well.
Alderperson Martin.
And I would tend to agree with that. I can understand how we ended up with the phrase, public comments may not identify specific personnel by name, because it was lifted out of part of the school district statement. But I think, the issues we're having with public comment is not so much about commenters identifying, staff members or personnel by name as part of their public comment, but it's the direction of the public comment towards staff or other participants, where instead they should be directing their comments to the chair. And I think if we could, keep it straight on comments are directed towards the chair and not specifically to staff or other members, then it shouldn't be an issue where the comments are identifying specific personnel by name.
So am I hearing that you want to strike?
I'm good with striking that sentence, public comments may not identify specific personnel by name.
Alderperson Tierney.
Thank you. I do agree with Alder Mertens that we need to stress that the comments are directed to the chair and not towards that alder person they might have a beef with, or the clerk, or anybody who is up here on this board. It should not be a personal attack to that alder or the chair, the clerk. It needs to be addressed to the chair, and if it's not, the chair needs to remind that person to have their comments directed to him.
The last sentence, the chair values civil discourse and may interrupt, terminate, or prohibit public comment that do not adhere to these rules. I think that sort of summarizes that. It brings it back to the point that the chair is moderating the decorum or the public comment. So we'll strike the public comments may not identify specific personnel by name. So So are we ready also then to take this to the committee of the whole? Very good. Any comments or questions with regard to that? Then moving on to discussion and materials needed for appointments and reappointments to boards, committees, and commissions. You have the citizen participation form in front of you.
Yes, we have that form, which from your last committee meeting, you wanted to kind of just retool it a little. I identified 15 different qualifications that are specific member spots on different committees, boards, and commissions. And then there were 3 different, I classify them as skills. A couple committees, they mentioned like having an interest in historic preservation. We have our Police and Fire Commission, which is, there's not supposed to be more than, I think, 3 or half the board made up of the same political affiliation. And then the third one is you're required to be involved in Wausau's arts community. And so I didn't know if there would be a specific, if you would like a skills or interest question on there, or just leave that out and that could be a follow-up question when the mayor's office is seeking someone to fill specific positions.
That would become part of the presenting that to the city council. Yes, Alderperson Martin.
Wouldn't that be included, on the last page of the form here? What qualifications and experience will you bring to the board, committee, or commission? If in the committee or commission description, there are certain skills or requirements, they would be able to list, they should, read the description of what that committee is, and then be able to list how, how their, what they, I guess, to put it bluntly, what they bring to the table. So I don't know if we need a special, a skills survey beyond that, other than them listing what their qualifications and experience are, and then it's up to the mayor in order to vet these people out.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Alderperson Tierney.
Thank you. I was kind of looking at the question. It says, why are you interested in serving on a city of Wausau board, committee, or commission? My thoughts were, why are you interested in serving on one of the, they're asked to choose 3 areas of interest. Why are they, why those 3 areas of interest? Instead of just saying a particular board, why those 3 that they have chosen to expand on, not just on a committee, but they had to choose.
Expanding on the reason for why they marked the 3 commissions or boards.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, we'll add that.
And then we'd be removing from the list the policing task force, the solar array task force, the board of canvassers. That's the local residents that they certify elections when we have municipal races on the ballot, and so I select that board from election officials. So it's a unique one that doesn't really fall under this bucket, as well as City County IT Commission, the actual intergovernmental commission. They select those appointments, and then the Neighbor to Neighbor Committee. It's not called that currently. That can be removed for now, and then the Safe Elections Task Force, which ended after the 2020 election.
And add the Board of Public Works, because that doesn't have any citizen members on it.
Is it supposed to?
No.
Oh, yeah,
Shouldn't
yeah.
be on the list. I was
I thought
sitting
you
here
said
checking
add it,
them off
sorry.
too. No, I was sitting here marking off the ones you
Is there a
rattled off.
possibility that that could have citizen members?
No, because by ordinance now you fix that as the city attorney, the finance director, and the director of public works. You can, makeup of the Board of Public Works can be anything, but you'd have to amend the ordinance.
The
So right now, a citizen could not even
So if that
be
would
appointed
be
to it.
amended, we would have to
Right.
amend, we would have to add Alderperson Tierney.
Thank you. The dog park committee, didn't that kind of stop when the dog parks were,
That was another one I was going to mention that I think sunset on its own once the park was constructed. I don't think that's any longer in effect.
And the legislative committee, too.
Yep, I think we repealed that. I think we have more committees than this, so I'll have to compare this to my updated list.
Any further comments or questions with regard to the appointments and reappointments to boards, commissions? Hearing none, we'll make those corrections. Next item on the agenda is discussion possible action recommending the final report on duties of boards, committees, and commissions, which you have in your packet.
I started drafting this, as you can see, over a year ago, and we're now getting back to it. That one, was it January to like May of 2024? Some of these items went to, well, they went to all the standing committees, but I think SISM saw it like 4 times and finally changed the name of their committee. We talked about the Parks and Rec Committee. Human Resources changed a few ordinances. We changed an ordinance with regard to the Economic Development Committee, which then sort of clashed with our property disposition program, because now, you know, we changed the ordinances to say that any sale or lease or purchase of any real property should go to infrastructure and the INF Committee, Infrastructure and Facilities Committee, rather than the Economic Development Committee. So Randy and I have already talked about that, and we will be changing the property disposition program policy, or tightening that up to comply with the ordinance. So you can see the addition in here into the Economic Development Committee description is only to negotiate with prospective purchasers or lessees of parcels in the city-owned business campus, or for private sector acquisition of private property for private sector residential or commercial redevelopment purposes. If it's for the acquisition of property for city facilities, then it would go to INF. Where I think I did not complete this, I think I need to flesh out more on the Public Health and Safety Committee description, so I apologize. I'm not sure this is finally complete. I need to go back and look at that, and I didn't have the time to do that this past week. So I gave you what I'd done to date. But this was all changed from the 1964 report that I had, was the last time it was approved by council, and our descriptions and what the committees do has drastically changed since then. So I went back through all of the committee meeting minutes and all of the ordinances where it described the duties of each committee to make sure those descriptions were captured in the summary under each of the standing committees. So if you have any comments or questions, I mean, this can be written any way, and I will finish it for the next go-around, I promise. And I don't think this made it into the packet, but I see here in April of 2024, I have an update here in my stuff, Caitlin,
It's
of
in
all
the
the
packet.
committees. Okay.
Yep.
So there we have those. That's good. All right. That's all I have.
Is, any comments or questions? Hearing none. Moving then on to discussion possible action on creating a process for restaggering appointment terms. Not sure.
We did not have anything in the packet for this item. We can postpone that to a
I
later
think
meeting.
we'll postpone that We'll continue to work on that. The next item on the agenda, discussion possible action on a summary of recommendations of proposed rule changes to the Committee of the Whole, and that you have in your packet. So that's the listing. Eventually, will the item that you just spoke on with regard to the report of duties, will that eventually have to end up into the, passed by city council and into the ordinance?
Yes. Well, it doesn't go into ordinance, but I would like it adopted by the council, and then we'd take those descriptions and put them on the city website under the descriptions of the committees.
Okay.
But it should be, we'll take the next version to committee of the whole.
Right.
And then if there are any changes made there, we'll take it on to council.
Okay, thank you. So you have the list of agendized public comment relating to agenda items as a standing item on standing committee meeting agendas. Revised Rule 5, which we talked about this evening, revised Rule 6, and then public comment statement to be stated during the meetings. Those would be the 4 items that would be bringing into the Committee of the Whole as soon as the mayor or the president of the city council decides to call a Committee of the Whole. Is that agreeable? Okay. Then any discussions with regard to possible future agenda items? There's a few things that we still have to bring into, just clear up yet, but that will happen at our next meeting. Usually our meeting is following the next,
Did you want to have reviewing the calendar of standing committee meetings at a future?
thank you. Just public, would you want to consider the changing of meetings, committee meetings and all at a future meeting? And we can talk about that. We can put that on the agenda then for our next meeting. Our next meeting is usually following the economic development meeting in
So that'd be
August.
August. August 5th is when the Economic Development Committee is meeting next. Sorry, it's so small.
So the next meeting will be August the 5th, following the economic development, most likely 6:30. Okay, with that, a motion to adjourn would be in order. There is a motion and a second. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.